As I continued to go through my catalog of memorable webcomics I read when I was younger, I came across one that I remembered liking, but didn't really feel all that strongly about. So I decided to reread it. And now I'm questioning why I felt so indifferent about it initially, because it's actually really good and a lot of fun. The webcomic in question is Rock and RIOT, created by Chelsey Furedi or Cherry Art Online. Now this is another webcomic that I remember being really popular. Not only are there plenty of videos about it on YouTube, but the creator herself also made 2 animated shorts about the comic that kind of went viral. Both are well made and a good time, so I definitely recommend giving them a watch. Links will be in the description below. Anyways, back to the comic itself. What is Rock and RIOT about? Well, the About section puts it pretty succinctly. The tale of opposing teenage gangs in the 1950s with an LGBTQ theme. The gangs in question are the Jackettes, the Rollers, and the Bandits. I think a good way of structuring this video would be to chat about each gang individually, with some occasional crossover here and there. Before I do that, however, let me issue a spoiler warning. I'm probably gonna spoil most, if not all of this comic. I know that's a slight departure from my more recent webcomic vids, but I don't know, this time it made more sense for me to do it this way. So if you'd like to check the comic out first, I've left the link in the description below. Not a long read whatsoever, you can probably finish it in one sitting if you wanted to. If you're still here, however, we can get right into it. Starting us off, we have the Jackettes, an all-girl gang founded by Connie, the group's headstrong leader. Members include the protective and upfront Debbie, the cool Triss, and the trustworthy Rolly. And right off the bat, I just love their designs, very cool and badass. Connie, I would say, has the most focus from this group and the webcomic as a whole, pretty much serving as its protagonist. This means that we get a lot of attention between her and the girl she has a big crush on, a kind and modest high school student and waitress named Carla. While Connie does flounder at impressing her at first, they eventually form a connection and become girlfriends. Their relationship is sweet. We get a lot of cute moments between them, including a bet Carla makes to Connie, where they have to dance together if they're accepted at prom. What's not so cute, however, is the Jackettes' rivalry with the Rollers. This rivalry actually goes way back from when they were all kids, with the Rollers denying the girls access to their gang simply cause they were girls. This pisses the girls off and motivates them to start their own gang, and they've been rivals ever since. There is one more layer to this rivalry, however, that fuels it, and that is Rolly. See, Rolly was initially part of the Rollers, but ultimately didn't feel like she belonged, discovering that she was trans. By finding understanding and compassion with the Jackettes, it was only natural for Rolly to make the switch, becoming their newest member. Suffice to say, the Rollers did not take the switch well, feeling like Rolly was stolen from them. More on the Rollers themselves in a bit. As for Debbie and Triss, they play more of a supporting role in the comic. They're never really the main focus of any particular chapter, which makes me feel some type of way, but I'll revisit that later in the video. Up next is the Rollers, an all-boy gang founded by Frankie, the group's overconfident leader. Members include the easygoing Clyde, the smart but shy Gene, and the chill Ed. Frankie, I would say, feels the most antagonistic of the bunch, which is fitting as he constantly clashes with Connie, our series protagonist. His sexism was what started this whole rivalry in the first place by shutting Connie and the girls down all those years ago, so yeah. Interestingly enough though, Frankie isn't actually the main focus of his respective group. No, that honor actually goes to Jean and Clyde, who've been best pals since they were kids. That friendship, however, gets shaken up when Clyde attempts to seize the moment by leaning in to kiss Jean at the drive-in theater, only for Frankie to come in and unknowingly interrupt the moment. From there, Clyde gets cold feet and tries to avoid conversation about that night, but eventually they talk about it, kiss, and become boyfriends. Like with Connie and Carla, their relationship is also really sweet. Another thing with Jean is him trying to hide the fact that he's smart and actually does his homework, as Frankie would consider that nerd behavior, which is honestly kind of funny. Lastly, with Ed, well, he's kind of in the same boat as Debbie and Tris as a supporting character, except with even less focus. Like I said before, more on that topic later on. Finally, we come to the Bandits, a genderqueer group founded by Ace, the group's mysterious agender leader. Members include the cunning and flirtatious Det, the adventurous Sunny, and the bookworm Skip. Now with the Bandits in general, they tend to just do their own thing and aren't really a part of that Jackets versus Rollers feud. Said thing is actually a business of doing school assignments for others in exchange for money. Ace has the most focus here. They're the one that Connie and Frankie fight over initially to get them to join their gang. They're the one that leads the initiative to switch out the final exams so they can relay the answers to their classmates. And probably most important of all, they're the one that asks Rolly out to prom, becoming a couple in the process. Again, super sweet relationship. Now, concerning the rest of the Bandits, I would say that they, again, fall into that supporting character category. Det seems to have a bit more focus, but otherwise, they don't really have big individual standout moments in the comic. I will say though that while the Bandits received the least focus from the story overall, I still enjoyed the 2 chapters they starred in quite a bit. They're a pretty enjoyable group. So, with all 3 gangs introduced, I can chat about the rest of the story. Basically, Connie catches Jean and Clyde during an intimate moment, and they, along with Carla, chat about their mutual queerness at the diner, connecting more in the process. This moment is turned on its head, however, when the rest of the Jackets and Rollers catches them. Trying to hide their queerness from everyone, Connie decides to run with the lie of dating Clyde, which angers Debbie and Frankie, as they're sworn enemies after all. Jean sticks with Clyde, and both of them are ousted from the Rollers by Frankie. Connie also gets banished from the Jackets by Debbie, ending the scene in a fairly sad note. It's clear though that Debbie still cares a lot about Connie and Carla, demanding to Frankie that Clyde and Jean stay away from the girls. Debbie gets into a fight with Frankie, and both gangs end up in detention, even those that weren't even there by association. Ultimately, with everyone here, things start getting hashed out. Connie admits that she lied about dating Clyde mainly to cover up for the fact that she's actually dating Carla. Jean and Clyde support Connie here by also coming out about their relationship, and from here, we get a domino effect. Turns out, Debbie and Tris were also in a secret relationship, and oh, Frankie too, he has a boyfriend named Sasha. And Ed, well, Ed's an aromantic asexual. So yeah, basically everyone is queer, which I absolutely love. Anyways, Debbie and Tris apologizes to Connie, Frankie apologizes to Jean and Clyde, and things are all good now, right? Well, no, cause now their school is banning folks from senior prom for either not conforming to the dress code or having a prom date that is, quote, inappropriate, unquote. Basically, it's their way of saying that you can't be visibly queer at prom. This shakes up the Jacquettes quite a bit, but there's hope. In numbers. Simply joining forces with the bandits, however, isn't enough. No. They'll need to go the extra mile and put aside their differences with the Rollers. Sasha informs the Rollers about the Jacquettes wanting to meet, and the two gangs are once again face to face. While there's pushback at first from Frankie, the proposal of everyone working together to get their night at prom does finally get to him, and he agrees to pitch in. He and the rest of the Rollers are also given the opportunity to apologize to Raleigh for pushing back on her decision to join the Jacquettes and become her true self, which Raleigh readily accepts. And with that, the three gangs are now united under a common goal, all decked out in the wardrobe of their choice and ready to take back prom. After seeing that simply walking into prom is a no-go, they opt for Plan B. With a final inspiring speech by Connie, this unified gang proceeds to rock and riot, driving their cars in full force and catching the admissions lady by surprise, passing her by as they drive into prom. Literally so badass. Like, it's so extra and ridiculous, and I love it. I really do. And so, our queer heroes find themselves inside prom, but on the chase from faculty. They proceed to bomb a prom photo in the most epically queer way possible. Sunny steals some cookies, and they all get the fuck out. This whole incident, however, seems to have given other prom goers the confidence they need to also shed their masks, fully embracing their queerness as well. And so we come to this comic's ending, everyone walking together, up a hill as the sun begins to set. They all lay down at the summit, happy with each other's company. Connie with Carla, Debbie with Tris, Jean with Clyde, Sunny with Skip, Ace with Raleigh, Frankie with Sasha. Even Ed and Det form a bond together as fellow aromantic asexuals. Frankie has a genuine reconciliation with Connie, and Carla reminds Connie of a bet they previously had in the story, one where they share a dance together if accepted at prom. While not technically accepted, the happiness and bliss felt by everyone else overrides any other doubt, and Connie gets to have her dance with Carla. Moore joins in on the dance, and later we see the gang hit the road, all together and unified through their queerness and desire to be their most authentic selves. Y'all, I gotta say, I kind of got teary-eyed there. Such a beautiful and heartfelt way to end this comic, 100%. Like, it really warmed my heart to see everyone so happy and content, so peaceful. I just love this ending so much. Chelsey couldn't have made a better ending in my opinion. This was perfect for me. The final two chapters were really strong, and the comic as a whole was such a great time. I loved the art style, the character designs, the story. I loved how aggressively queer this comic was. Like, let's talk about that for a moment. Cause yeah, everyone is in fact queer. I know some people will have an issue with that on the basis of realism or statistics or whatever, but honestly, I think they missed a point here. Everyone being queer, having varied gender identities and sexual orientations, is the whole point of the story. It's about people putting aside their differences, their conflicts, and uniting together under one shared goal of being able to freely express yourself and love who you want to love. And the fact that this story is set in the 50s makes it even more meaningful. A while back, I came across this blog called Comics Queeries, which delves into comics with queer themes. Rock and RIOT was one of the comics covered, and one blog post about it posed this question: why set a love story with queer characters in an era that was intolerant of them? The author of this blog, a guy named Esteban, answered with this: Rock and RIOT is a great example of this reclaiming and queering of history. The 1950s are often glorified in the United States as a kind of golden era. World War II was over, the economy was booming, suburban development was thriving, and most importantly, the aesthetic was on point. The cars, the music, the clothes. It was also carefree, remembered with such fondness, especially after the doom and gloom of the 1980s set in. Conservatives wax poetic about the 50s, but for those that couldn't conform to the narrow mainstream, the 50s were a time of fear. In the eyes of the public, marginalized groups didn't exist or had no place in society, which in turn reflects in the media of the time and about it, heteronormative and whitewashed. While some may cry historical inaccuracy and forced representation at a story like Rock and RIOT, the reality is that beyond the conceit that these characters lived in relative safety, queer people existed then with all the emotion, need for companionship, and excellent taste as they do now. We need to see more stories like this. And I couldn't agree more with this sentiment. While the video's title implies that the 50s were lacking in queers, the fact of the matter is that queer people have always existed, no matter what time period. So yeah, in that respect, the title was actually misleading. The 50s always had gayness in it. It just didn't have the freedom to openly express it. There's more that Esteban mentioned in his blog about Rock and RIOT, so I'll include the link in the description below. It's a pretty insightful read. I also want to give kudos to the fact that our cast here aren't just diverse in sexuality and gender identity, but also in body type and skin color. Again, the 50s were a time of fear and racism against marginalized groups. So to see these queer people of color happy and uplifted in this story really warms my heart. It also reaffirms once again that queer people, specifically queer people of color, have always existed. Special shout out to Connie, awesome main protagonist. I love her and don't think the story would have been as great without her inclusion. Okay, so far it's all been love and praises. I do have one main gripe, however, one that I alluded to while covering the different gangs. Certain characters feel a bit underdeveloped. To point them out specifically, we have Debbie and Triss from the Jaquettes, Ed from the Rollers, and Det, Sonny, and Skip from the Bandits. There's also Sasha as well, who basically served as a recurring background character up until the reveal that he was Frankie's boyfriend. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not saying that every character should have the exact level of screen time in the comic. It's very much natural for a story to have main characters and supporting characters. I just wish we got a bit more from our supporting cast. To see Debbie and Triss literally introduced in the first page with such stunning character designs taking a backseat in this story kind of makes me sad. Like, I wanted to see more from these girls. Even their apology to Connie for kicking her out of the Jaquettes felt like an afterthought. It was literally just a piece of paper saying, "We are sorry, Connie, will you forgive us?" Now, to be fair, I did find that kind of funny, so I'm not too mad at it, but my point still stands. Ed as well. What's his deal? Yeah, he's chill, a man of few words with some rad shades, but what else? Det, Sunny, and Skip too. What are they all about beyond being part of Ace's gang? And Sasha has it the worst. We know almost nothing about him. For me, I feel like these characters would have benefited more by adding a few chapters to the story. Maybe a chapter specifically for Debbie and Triss to get to know them and their relationship more. Ed and Det seemed pretty close in the end. A chapter exploring their dynamic beforehand would have been really cool. Same with Sunny and Skip. They seem like fun and would have loved to learn more about them. And finally, a chapter for Sasha and Frankie. Not only would we learn more about Sasha, but it would also give us the opportunity to see a different, softer side to Frankie. While I do think Frankie got a decent amount of screen time as an antagonist, I feel like his overall character could have been fleshed out more. And so, through the hypothetical addition of these chapters, every relationship gets their moment, their chance to be spotlighted in the comic versus just the core three. Of course, this is all easier said than done. I can't even begin to imagine how tough it is creating an engaging webcomic with this many characters and wanting everyone to have their moment, so to speak. So while certain characters being underdeveloped is my main criticism, it certainly doesn't stop me from loving them. I think they're all wonderful and so fun to learn about. I just wish we got more. In the great grand scheme of things though, Rock and RIOT overall is an excellent webcomic and one I highly recommend. It's a feel-good story about gangs setting aside their differences and uniting together to fight for their queerness and the freedom to express it. And I think that's a cause that's more than worth rioting over. As always, thank you so much for stopping by. I hope you enjoyed the video and we'll see you in the next one. Take care.